Hello, and welcome to the course of U.S. history. I'm your host, Mr. Samuelson. Last time we were together, we were looking at New France and their colonies based upon the fur trade in North America. But now we're going to really dig in to the 13 original colonies, which is the focus of this, our second unit. Today's lesson is going to focus on English settlers in Virginia. Now, this begins with the English colonization of Roanoke Island, which is off the coast of Virginia, in 1585. This was the English first attempt at a colony in North America. Now, settlers are going to return the following year. They simply did not like living in that colony. It was not productive and they were not getting wealthy, so they were out of there. But they will try again on Roanoke Island. But this second attempt is even less successful, as when the English return a few years later, they find that nobody is still there. In fact, the only clue is this word, Croatoan, carved into a tree. That's it. To this day, we don't know exactly what happened to those colonists. Now, the potential wealth of an American colony is going to stay alive in the dreams of the English people. English people want to get wealthy, and they see this as potentially a way to do that. They saw what happened with Spain. But the costs of these failed missions meant that King James I is not going to pony up the cash for it. It's just become too expensive for him to keep throwing money after money. He doesn't see them as successful, so he is not going to pay for them anymore. However, English merchants still see a potential to make money. And so, when the king won't pay anymore, they just decide, well, we can still do this, we'll just have to use our own money. So English merchants figure out a way to spend their own money to create colonies. They do this by creating what is called a joint stock company. They call it the Virginia Company. A joint stock company just basically means that they're all going to put in some of their money, and if it winds up like the Roanoke colony, where all is lost, well, they'll have only lost a little bit of their money. So if 20 people all put together a little bit of money each, and they all lose it, well, they didn't lose as much money as if one person had put his entire fortune into creating a colony. Now, they are issued a royal charter by the king. So the king issues them a charter, gives them permission to create their own colony in the New World. So the colony will still be a part of the English Empire, but they will be able to rule it as a part of that empire. So the Virginia Company puts this mission together. They gather together 144 men. They board ships and off they go to Jamestown. Now, this is a very troubled mission, and it starts out very badly. 40 of these settlers are going to die just crossing the Atlantic Ocean. They have a really rough crossing. It does not go well for them. So their 144 are already down by 40 before they even reach Jamestown. And then these 104 men arrive in Jamestown, and they almost immediately start digging for gold. The Spanish had gotten wealthy by finding Aztec gold, so the English were going to get wealthy by finding gold. There must be gold everywhere in this new world. Look at what Spain has been able to do. Well, there's no gold in Virginia. So they spend all this time digging, they don't find anything, and in the meantime, they're not preparing for winter. And they're not in Mexico. They're in Virginia. And yeah, Virginia's not quite as cold as, say, the Northeast or Midwest or other areas in the US, but it can get cold in winter. And they're not preparing for it. And by January, only 38 of them are still alive. 144 we started out with. 104 landed in Virginia. 38 are still alive. This is not going well for Jamestown. But, all right, they still have 38 settlers. There's still, a colony there. So let's see what happens next. Well, what happens next is that one of those survivors, a man by the name of John Smith, Captain John Smith, takes control of the colony. He says, I'm in charge now. You're going to do what I say or you're going to leave. And if you leave, good luck. And he takes over. And the first thing he does is he reaches out to his neighbors, the Powhatan Indians. He says, we'd really need some help here. We'd really like to form a positive relationship with you guys and see what we could possibly do for each other. And this is going well, but unfortunately, Smith suffers a serious injury. And when the next group of settlers arrive from England, he hops on a boat and goes back to England. So they had this strong leadership, but it was a temporary leadership, and now it's really lacking. And this colony has 500 new settlers. Here's the problem. They had 38. Those 38 had barely survived. They had not been spending their time plowing the fields and planting crops and getting ready for a whole bunch of new settlers, or at least not enough preparation for numbers like this. So these 500 settlers show up. There aren't enough houses. There's not nearly enough food. This colony cannot support these 500 people. And when that next winter hits, well, things get real bad. And by spring, only 60 still remain. So we had 538, rough number there, down to 60. We're talking about 90%, just short of 90% of the population of the colony dying over the winter. That is a bad, bad time to be in Jamestown. However, settlers do keep arriving. They do eventually get their act together, and the town begins to grow. Now, one of the reasons it's growing is because of this man right here. His name is John Rolfe. And he's going to figure out that, we can't dig into the ground and pull out gold, but we can grow something from the ground and trade that for gold. And what he plants is tobacco, and finds out that Virginia soil is perfect for tobacco, and he grows himself a big tobacco plantation. There's also a side story here if you're interested. This little lady right here, her name is Pocahontas. I'm not going to get into her in this story. Disney has done quite a bit with her, so go ahead and check out Disney and learn a little bit more about Pocahontas. I'm going to move on now. At first, indentured servants are used as a lot of the labor. Indentured servants are poor individuals. They don't have a lot of money, but they want to come to Virginia because Virginia is the land of opportunity. They might one day get rich, but they can't even afford to make the voyage. So somebody else pays for their voyage. And in exchange, they owe labor. And it can be for a period of 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. It can be for different periods of time, but it's almost like a system of slavery. But it is time limited. However, these indentured servants don't do all that well in the field. It's hot in the summers. There's a lot of disease that they're suffering from. Indentured servants just don't wind up being the best laborers. But in 1620, the first African slaves arrive in Jamestown. And African slaves are eventually going to replace the system of indentured servitude in order to bring labor into Virginia. We'll do a lot more on slavery in a future lesson. Family life. Now, Virginia life attracted very few women. There were very few women who were excited about going off, getting on this ship, sailing across the Atlantic, and then starving to death in Jamestown. It just wasn't a good deal for them. So the Virginia Company tries to sweeten the deal. They say, you don't have to pay for your passage. You don't have to pay a dime. We'll get you over to Virginia for free. And then once you get there, you're going to find out that there are all kinds of eligible men, some more successful than others. We're going to let you choose who your husband is going to be. Does this sound like a deal? If so, come to Virginia. The men who are chosen, so a woman arrives and says, yeah, this man right there, the single man with the prosperous farm and looks like, he cleans up a little bit after himself, you're the one. And if the man agrees to the marriage, he has to pay for the wife's voyage. So they pay the Virginia Company. Thank you, Virginia Company, for bringing me my wife. Here's your money for her voyage. And you have yourselves a colonial marriage. filled with love and romance, right? Well, wasn't it all that loving and romantic of a time? Romantic. I think it just made up a word. I like it though. We'll keep it. Let's look at the Native American neighbors of the Jamestown colony. Now, if you remember, John Smith had put some effort into building a positive relationship with the Powhatan, and things had really gone reasonably well while he was there. Certainly bumps, but reasonably well. And that relationship had been okay, but then starts to strain. And it's straining because the colony keeps expanding and it pushes into Powhatan lands. And this is interrupting with their farming and their hunting in the region. And it's really starting to threaten their way of life. See, these tobacco plantations, they take up a lot of land. They're very successful for the English, not so much for the Powhatan. Well, the Powhatan eventually are put into a position where they feel like they need to defend their land against the colonists. So they attack in a series of raids against settlements that the English are making. Well, the English plan a massive counterattack. And in this counterattack, they nearly wipe out the Powhatan tribe and establish themselves really as the dominant power in that region along the James River in Virginia. Now, they are in charge. What are they going to do with it? Well, in 1619, the Virginia Company had sent a governor to rule the colony. Okay, no more, colonial self-rule. We're gonna put somebody in charge, and this is our land. This is our colony. We're gonna send our governor. The governor was not all that successful, and he was replaced by a royal appointee in 1624, where Virginia becomes a royal colony. That is a colony governed by the king and his representatives. Now, colonists themselves, however, are electing representatives to write the colony's laws. So the colonists choose these representatives. These representatives get together into an organized group, and they write their own laws. This becomes known as the Virginia House of Burgesses. And it is the first legislature in North America that is a elected group that comes together to write the laws. The governor is going to be enforcing those laws, but Virginia has the House of Burgesses to write those laws, beginning a democratic tradition for the American people. Thank you very much for joining me. Next time we're going to be looking at the Pilgrims in Plymouth and those religious separatists that want to create a home for themselves. That's all for this time. Thank you for joining me for the course of U.S. history, and farewell.